Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Impact webinar series today, Leveraging LinkedIn to Support Career Mentoring with Youth. My name is Dan Horgan with Mentor, and first and foremost, I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us for today's session. You're going to get tons of information and some fantastic resources from our partners at LinkedIn that really will support a lot of your youth mentoring work across the country. I'm really excited because we have a pretty diverse mix of participants on today's session, representing corporations, foundations, mentor affiliates, as well as mentoring programs and practitioners across the country. Just a couple quick operational points before we jump in and get started. First, I just want to remind everybody that we have put everybody on mute except for our presenters today, just to make sure that we maintain the best sound quality throughout the session. And we are also recording the sessions. We want to make sure that the recording that we send out is the best quality for you as well. That doesn't mean that we cannot engage. So if you have any questions or any comments throughout the course of today's session, really would encourage you to leverage the chat box located on the right side of your screen. At any point in time during today's session, as you're listening to the conversation, please feel free to type in your questions. I'll be monitoring that chat box and then pulling back the trending questions at the end when we move into the Q&A period. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. As I mentioned, my name is Dan Horgan. I'm the Senior Director of Corporate Engagement for Mentor, the National Mentoring Partnership. And I am thrilled to be able to have join me today, Barry Saltman from LinkedIn. Welcome, Barry.
Thanks, Dan. It's really exciting to be here, and I can take a minute to introduce myself and explain why I'm here. So I am a social impact manager at LinkedIn on a team called LinkedIn for Good. And the mission of LinkedIn is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. But our team, LinkedIn for Good, thinks of ourselves as responsible for underlining the every in that mission statement and making sure that we are specifically connecting underrepresented communities to economic opportunity. So on the team, my role is three-pronged. One is to provide marketing resources for the team and make sure we're telling our story internally and externally. Another responsibility that I manage is activating LinkedIn users or members who are passionate about giving back or paying it forward and connecting them to opportunities. For example, connecting LinkedIn members to mentorship opportunities that are hosted in Mentoring Connector. And finally, I manage a program called LinkedIn Coaches, which I'll tell you all about today, and is all about connecting folks from underrepresented communities to the mentors, jobs, and networks that they need to succeed. And Mentor has been an incredible partner for us as we figured out how to connect our members and our employees to meaningful opportunities to give back. And really excited to chat with all of you today and learn more about your perspectives from the corporate and or the nonprofit side of the house.
Awesome. Thanks, Barry. So before we dig in, I usually like to just start these impact webinars by acknowledging that we have new folks that are not as familiar with Mentor, the National Mentoring Partnership. So I just wanted to take a couple minutes just to give you guys a background on who we are as an organization. So we are a national organization here in the U.S. that's been around for over 26 years. Our mission is really at the end of the day to increase the quality and the quantity of mentoring relationships for America's youth across the country. We really do that work across three different domains. One is around raising awareness and advocating for more support and engagement within youth mentoring in order to ultimately close the mentoring gap in the U.S. The second is around providing training and technical assistance to our mentoring network across the country, and we do that nationally and in partnership with our affiliates across the country serving at a state or regional level. And then really increasing the investment in mentoring, ranging from everything from leveraging dollars for research and making sure that we're constantly evaluating effective practices in mentoring, to also investing in innovation to make sure that we're constantly thinking about ways that mentoring can help address a variety of social issues, from academic performance to poverty to workforce solutions. We definitely do not do this work alone, and so we have a national network of mentoring programs that includes over 1,800 programs across the country, some of which are larger organizations that many of you, I'm sure, have heard of, like City Year or Big Brothers Big Sisters, the YMCA. And then we serve a lot of smaller scale organizations and communities across the country as well. Again, by providing them training and technical assistance and really learning with them what it takes to meet the needs of youth and mentors across the country. As I mentioned, we have a national footprint, and in partnership with 26 affiliates that are serving at a state or regional level. Those affiliates are supporting networks of mentoring programs within their geography, and they're doing very similar work that I mentioned earlier around raising awareness around the importance of mentoring, as well as providing the training and technical assistance to build the capacity of mentoring programs to both deepen their work as well as expand their network of support for youth in their communities. In addition to our mentoring programs across the country and our affiliates, we also work in partnership with a lot of public private entities, including groups like LinkedIn. And so ranging from EY to Bank of America to JP Morgan Chase to Nike, we're working with companies especially to increase employee engagement in mentoring, to elevate mentoring in partnership with these corporations' brands, and then also increasing, again, the overall investment from these companies into the mentoring field. The need for mentoring is great. We know that from our research that 1 in 3 young people across the country are growing up without a mentor or formal caring adult relationship in their lives outside of their family, which puts us at around 9 million youth across the country that we're looking to try to make sure have access to a caring adult that can walk alongside of them and support them in whatever ways they need to be successful in school, in life, and in work. We know as well from our research that mentoring does have an impact across multiple domains. If you look at the research alone in academics, we know that mentoring can help increase attendance rates. It can help improve grades, as well as improve graduation rates for schools, as well as increased attendance at college. We know that it increases engagement in extracurricular activities, as well as different community leadership roles. And we also know that at the end of the day, and this is my favorite statistic, that 90% of those who have had a mentor say that they are interested in being a mentor for someone else. And so that's an incredible opportunity for us to think about how do we, again, support these mentees along their journey and really engage them down the road as mentors as well to support the generations that come after them. So without further ado, that was a brief overview of who we are at Mentor. You can learn a lot more at mentoring.org. But without any delay, I want to really turn it over to Barry in this first section, who's going to provide for us an overview of LinkedIn for Good and the LinkedIn Coaches Initiative. After Barry shares that overview, we're going to move into our second section where Barry and I are going to talk about partnership advice. So really, how do we bring this work to life within our career mentoring initiatives? And then I'll turn it back over to Barry for our third section, where she's going to highlight some pretty incredible LinkedIn resources that all of you can leverage and integrate into your programming and to your work supporting communities across the country. So Barry, I'll toss it back over to you.
Great. Thanks, Dan. So I told you all a little bit about the goal of our team, which is to connect underrepresented communities to economic opportunity. And I'd love to share more about how we're structured. So we are the social impact arm of LinkedIn, and most of our team, which is pretty small, we only have 6.5 full-time employees, is focused on employee programs. So at LinkedIn, we have over 11,000 employees globally, and the employee programs team is thinking through how we can engage our employees in giving and volunteering that can really make a difference and really establish volunteering and mentorship through nonprofit organizations as part of our company's culture and ethos. So on the right, you see an actual photo from one of our events where LinkedIn employees had the opportunity to meet with youth who are seeking career advice. And this was specifically from a speed mentoring opportunity that we hosted. We also have on our team a program called LinkedIn Coaches, and this overlaps significantly with our employee programs team. But LinkedIn Coaches is a broad umbrella term that refers to all of our career development curriculum and programming that connects underrepresented communities to mentors, networks, and jobs that they need to succeed. And that programming takes different forms with different facilitators. Some of that programming is done with our employees. So you can see the example I just mentioned in the picture on the right. But we also work with nonprofit organizations to train their trainers so that nonprofits can integrate LinkedIn Coaches curriculum into their own programming, and then their program staff feel equipped to deliver the content on their own. We've also done some more creative partnerships where we have had LinkedIn Coaches curriculum been a project, for instance, for mentors to deliver with their mentees. So there are different ways to implement this curriculum depending on the unique needs of youth and, of course, the bandwidth and resources available within a nonprofit organization. The curriculum comes in various different forms related to career development and professional advancement. Our most commonly requested curriculum is simply LinkedIn 101. What is a professional brand? What is a network? And how can I use LinkedIn to find a job? And for many of the young people we work with, LinkedIn is a totally unfamiliar concept, or a concept that they think really only pertains to wealthy white businessmen who are in a certain sector. And they don't really feel like the idea of a network or professional brand is accessible to them. So we really break down in this curriculum what a professional brand is, what your network is, and the fact that it includes your former boss at Starbucks or your neighbor or your former basketball coach. And those are all people that you could use to potentially get a job and start building a meaningful career. We also do, primarily with our employees, speed mentoring sessions and career conversations like career panels, if there's more of an interest in just allowing youth to access different stories and narratives and hear about our employees' various journeys to where they got to where they are today. And then we'll do LinkedIn profile reviews, often at broader job fairs. So we'll set up a LinkedIn Coaches booth and have a presence where job seekers can come and meet with LinkedIn employees one-on-one to talk about their career journeys or just have their existing LinkedIn profiles reviewed. And I know Dan will be sending out these slides and some additional resources. So I just included some links here where you can explore our existing content and also request a session. We are not in every city in the U.S., but LinkedIn does have a presence in New York, Southern California, Chicago, Omaha, and then Toronto, not in the U.S., but close by. So if you are located in any of those cities and you think it might be valuable for LinkedIn employees to have an in-person experience with the youth in your program, then we can certainly work through those inquiries, and you can request a conversation in the link here. So on the next slide, I just wanted to share one of the perspectives we recently got from a LinkedIn employee, because our goal with this work, as with any corporate social impact team, is to create value for employees. There is, of course, an employee retention and experience play, because we find that so many employees say after attending a LinkedIn Coaches event that this is the reason they stay at LinkedIn. But obviously, at the end of the day, we want to drive impact for LinkedIn members and for job seekers. And we recently heard from a LinkedIn employee named Giselle that she attended a College Spring event. So College Spring is an organization that operates locally in San Francisco and had brought in some first-generation college students for a LinkedIn Coaches session. And after that event, which was last year, one of the attendees followed up with her. And the attendee, Sonia, asked her to be her mentor for a year and guide her to find her dream job at her dream company. And since then, they've met once per month and talked for 45 minutes at a time. And Giselle said currently Sonia's working in Orlando and secured an internship at Disney and has more courage and empowerment. And Giselle's experience was that she felt like she was lucky to be part of her career journey and her success. So our dream is that these sessions will not just be one-time events, but instead they will spark relationships, potentially even mentor-mentee relationships that can actually be a really positive force and a guide in a young person's life. Next slide. So again, how do we actually bring these coaches curriculum opportunities to life? I mentioned some of the sessions are just organized by my team with our employees, but there are also some ways that companies and nonprofits have really taken the curriculum and run with it to adapt to their unique audiences and their needs. One example is EY, one of our corporate partners, and EY runs a college access and persistence program called College Map. And we're currently working with them to customize the LinkedIn Coaches curriculum for their students. And then they plan to equip their mentors, who are EY employees, with this curriculum to deliver to the high school students who are in the program. So what I love here is that they've recognized that EY employees probably all have LinkedIn profiles. To them, it's probably not a very exciting tool or anything they've thought of as a special skill, but they can actually put curriculum in the hands of these employees, and it gives them an opportunity to feel like they can own this curriculum. They are actually experienced with LinkedIn because it's already part of their professional world, and it's really a project for them to do with their mentees. So there's both an employee activation play here, as well as a value add for the young people who are in this program and beginning to think about developing their careers. We also work with a number of nonprofits who have integrated LinkedIn Coaches curriculum in ways that are unique to their programs. So Year Up is an example of an organization that has had LinkedIn Coaches curriculum integrated into their learning and development phase for a long time. And the LinkedIn profile is considered homework for students, and they equate the summary on a LinkedIn profile to a student's elevator pitch. And they talk about power statements, and really it's not just a web page, but it's also about your entire professional brand and how you present yourself to the world as you transition to a corporate workplace. And I've noticed anecdotally, because we work often with Year Up students, is that they really use LinkedIn as a tool to connect with professionals after events to keep in touch. So a job fair is not just a job fair if after the job fair, the students connect with everyone they met on LinkedIn and follow up with questions. And my colleague recently received a note after doing a LinkedIn Coaches session from a Year Up student who said, "Thank you so much for this opportunity. I would love to learn more about opportunities at your company. I hope we can stay in touch. And now, should there be any opportunities, this woman is in my colleague's network, and hopefully in an ideal scenario, she can be connected to a job through this referral one day." And Year Up also uses LinkedIn to track alumni outcomes. So there are Year Up groups. All of their students are encouraged to put Year Up as an organization on their profile. And long term, it will give them a way to track alumni who perhaps are not reporting directly to Year Up on their employment outcomes, but are updating their LinkedIn profiles. Another example is JVS, Jewish Vocational Services, which is a program for job seekers seeking placement in the Bay Area. And JVS has also integrated LinkedIn Coaches curriculum into their training for job seekers. And I think the way they've done it is really interesting. They're working with adults, and they want their programming to be interesting and engaging and somewhat challenging. So when they do their training, they'll include activities like tactical scavenger hunts on the platform. So find a job that interests you and highlight what words you would put in your cover letter or your resume, or draft a message to a new connection. How do you write a message that doesn't seem like awkward networking, but is genuine and might get you some additional notice if you're interested in working at that company? So there's a real interactive component to their curriculum. And then they supplement that with LinkedIn employee events, both at the JVS site and on-site at LinkedIn, so their job seekers can see what our company culture and site are like. And those events are often mock interviews, speed networking, so they get to meet a lot of different LinkedIn employees, or profile reviews. They've already created their LinkedIn profile, so now they have the opportunity to get feedback from LinkedIn employees. And now I will kick it back over to Dan to share a little bit more about partnership advice. And yeah, why don't you take it from there, Dan?
Excellent. Thanks, Barry. Before I transition, I just have a quick follow-up question. For those that are listening and are curious, some of the innovation that you've seen here, which is great. I love the scavenger hunt idea. I think that's such a fantastic way of really making it hands-on and engaging and getting familiar with all that LinkedIn can offer to both mentors and mentees working in a relationship. Can you talk a little bit more about like how the speed networking plays out, just so folks might be able to think about ways that they could integrate that into their programs?
Yeah, absolutely. So we call these sessions speed networking or speed mentoring, sort of depending on the audience and depending on the tone we want to set, the topics we encourage people to cover. And tactically, what it looks like is, let's say, 10 pairs of chairs. And for 10 minutes at a time, a job seeker or a young person will chat with a LinkedIn employee or another volunteer, and they'll be given on each side some guidance. So Mentor has actually helped us create some materials so that people feel like they know what to talk about. So they'll have some questions they can use to guide the conversation. And usually job seekers will end up talking about how they're in this place in life or they don't know what they want to do and how should they think about pivoting and what kinds of experience does this volunteer have that could be useful. So some of the high level questions actually, rather than the tactical, like, what should I phrase this as on my LinkedIn profile? It's actually an opportunity to have a higher level conversation. So after 10 minutes, the job seekers or the volunteers will rotate, and then a new pair will have 10 minutes to chat. And you could fit 6 of those conversations into an hour-long session. And the reason we like it is because, as you all know, since you're immersed in the mentoring world, it can feel awkward and inorganic at times to force a volunteer and a mentee together to have a quote unquote mentoring conversation for an hour. But this gives the opportunity, gives job seekers the opportunity to chat with these professionals for 10 minutes each. If they like the person and click with them, they can follow up, and perhaps they have a relationship like my colleague Giselle, where they continue to meet with their mentor every month for 45 minutes. Or maybe they didn't really feel that click, but they have 6 new people they can add to their network. And all of a sudden, their network is expanded exponentially in terms of the opportunities they're seeing on LinkedIn, who they're connected to in the professional world to get referrals or informational interviews. So there's both that, there's twofold, I think, the benefits of chatting with multiple people. One is that you're not forced into an hour-long conversation with someone you may not click with, and you have the opportunity to sort of shop around, so to speak. But also, you're getting more ways to expand your network. And at LinkedIn, we totally believe that your network and who you know is everything. And so we want to make sure that these job seekers and young people that we're working with are beginning to expand their networks when they come to events like this.
That's great. And I can tell you firsthand, I participated in a similar speed networking career mentoring session back in January. And one of the individuals that I met was currently enrolled as a core member with City Year. And, we totally clicked. She is getting ready to end her City Year experience and is looking for job opportunities in the New York market. And we've been able to stay in touch ever since that career speed networking event back in January. So these events, these sort of one-time events, I just always say can always blossom into something more. And sometimes it's just that one sort of mentoring moment, a deeper relationship that lasts a lot longer, or that goes a lot deeper in terms of the impact that you can have on young people. So just want to reiterate what Barry said too, is there are a few links on one of the previous slides. We will be sending out the slides with the recording from today's session, and we'll also include some additional resources that you might be interested in leveraging that maybe helps to guide one of these scavenger hunts or helps to guide some of the speed networking or career mentoring events that you might want to host with youth in your program or employees from your company. So as we transition, Barry has talked a lot about some of the company-to-company partnerships with EY, as well as some of the nonprofit integration with Europe and Jewish Vocational Services. Well, we thought it would be helpful to just spend a couple minutes doing, particularly, again, just acknowledging that we've got a diversity of representatives on the phone coming at this work from different angles. And especially when thinking about the amazing LinkedIn 101 training that anybody can pick up and leverage either as a workshop facilitator, as a mentor, or in a train-to-trainer model, where you can train some of your nonprofit staff to be equipped to deliver this in a workshop setting with mentors and mentees or with youth from your programs. One of the questions that I often got asked across the country is, what are some of the trends in corporate partnerships? And as I seek to build these relationships with mentors or potential mentors that come into my organization and work with my youth, around setting up or fully leveraging a LinkedIn profile. And so what I wanted to do is just spend a few minutes sharing some of the trends that I've seen in corporate partnerships that I'm a part of, and then certainly give Barry a chance to share her perspective on some of these trends as well. So just 5 come to mind, and so I just want to quickly highlight on them and then certainly encourage you to, in the question and chat box, share any questions or additional comments that you might have from your own experience in corporate partnerships as well. The first is just around employee engagement. There was a time in corporate social responsibility work that a lot of the emphasis was placed on the financial contribution to the nonprofit sector. And that has really shifted over the last several years around making sure that we're not just writing checks to support programs, but we're also looking for creative and innovative ways to engage employees. Part of that push has been largely a lot of emphasis on the millennial generation. I think I read a statistic recently that said it's one of the top 3 interview questions now that millennials ask when seeking employment is how does the company engage their employees within the community in a meaningful way? And so as you think about building these partnerships out in the community, whether, again, it's company to company or company to nonprofit, think about ways that you can engage employees as mentors, whether it's, again, these one-time mentoring events that hopefully spark longer-term relationships, or longer-term mentoring relationships as someone's on their path to employment or on their path to college. The other way of engaging employees as well would be in terms of pro bono or skill-based volunteerism. One of the things that we've learned in our research at Mentor is that 51% of mentoring programs across the country operate on an annual budget of under $50,000. And so with really limited capacity in terms of operating and supporting these mentoring programs, we want to make sure that through pro bono and skill-based volunteers, that we're helping them to support their marketing campaigns to raise awareness or raise funds to drive more impact in their local communities, or help them support the infrastructure that they need to be able to track the results or monitor the results of the mentoring relationships that they've matched. And then lastly is just think about employee engagement in the sense of board engagement, whether it's bringing on young professionals from local companies onto junior boards or working groups, or engaging people on your formal board of directors or board of advisors to provide counsel and strategic advice to how you're operationalizing your programs, to how you are scaling those programs or developing the strategic goals for your organization overall. The question I have, Barry, for you is when you think about LinkedIn's engagement in this space across all of the different dimensions you shared, whether it's leading the LinkedIn 101 session or engaging in the one-time speed networking sessions, what have you found that really drives employee engagement? What gets them excited about participating in these things?
Yeah, it's a great question, Dan. And honestly, a process for us. We're continuing to find out how to engage employees. Right now, we have about a third of our employees who are annually engaged in volunteering through LinkedIn for Good. And so we're constantly working to increase that number. I think what's really worked is, to your point, recognizing that there are the volunteering opportunities like mentoring and leading a training session, as well as the skill-based volunteering opportunities. And we try to do an 80-20 split. So 80% of our opportunities that we offer employees roughly are in the LinkedIn coaches bucket, focused on direct service around career development, professional advancement, like LinkedIn 101 or mentoring opportunities. But then we also recognize that maybe 20% of employees don't really have an interest in mentoring right now, or don't have any interest or feel uncomfortable leading a classroom or participating in a networking event, but they might be really excited to build a website for a nonprofit or to do some budget analysis for a nonprofit. And instead of doing one of our direct service opportunities, to take advantage of a pro bono skilled volunteering opportunity. So I think incorporating a mix, and when nonprofits approach with a wide range of offerings, I think that's great, because even if we can't accommodate an in-person event, we might be able to share an opportunity with our employees that would be on their own time and more of a pro bono skilled opportunity. So I think that that's been really critical. And then the other critical piece for us is making sure that we're doing regular listening sessions and understanding who employees want to work with. So we also tend to focus on sort of the 16 to 24-year-old age range. But then we heard from our employees that many of them were interested in working with younger kids. So now we're sure to know where to direct those employees who might not be interested in our core programs, but could connect with a lot of wonderful organizations to spend their time. So I think from the nonprofit perspective, as you try to tell the story of employee engagement and begin working with a corporate partner, it makes sense to highlight the unique audience that you're serving and how you believe that the employees at the company, at least some of them, will want an offering like yours, even if it's not a core program, and also indicate that you have a range of opportunities. It might not just be your core mentoring program, but you might be looking for someone in communications to put together a comms plan for you, and you'd be happy for that type of support as well.
That's awesome. I love the last point you made, Barry, about making sure that you acknowledge there's a range of ways that people can get. I think the power of choice is so important when it comes to driving employee engagement. I think also in terms of a trend we see is a big emphasis on impact. And by impact, I really mean sort of delivering on a triple bottom line. So thinking about it in the context of not just what are the outcomes of the youth that are engaged in our mentoring program, but what are the outcomes for our business, including those employees that are engaging in these variety of projects that they could participate in. I think EY has actually done a fantastic job really looking at, again, not just the youth outcomes of College Map, but they also look at what's the impact in terms of their employee engagement who are stepping up to serve as mentors within the program. So how is it impacting their overall employee satisfaction, their employee engagement scores? How is it helping them in terms of developing certain leadership competencies within the organization, which certainly help in terms of upward mobility? And then the third area of triple bottom line is really how are we delivering on community goals? So really, how are we strengthening our community so that both our youth and our business and our schools and so forth in the community are all thriving, sort of all boats rising to make sure that we're living in the strongest communities possible. This really requires, in terms of impact, a focus beyond just corporate social responsibility, but to some of Perry's previous points, really thinking about what is the impact of these initiatives on HR in terms of not just attracting talent and really diversifying the talent within our businesses and organizations, but also in terms of driving their engagement and driving their opportunities. So increasing their access and their opportunity to really thrive within our organizations and thrive within our communities as they develop further their leadership skills. It also requires us to look at it from a lens of marketing. So how are we helping leverage essentially a company's marketing or brand assets in the process of raising awareness, not only of our programs, but on the impact that mentoring relationships can have. And I'll sort of tag team this with another trend, which is the power of storytelling. A mentor of mine told me a long time ago that a great story is all about a person with a name helping a person with a name. So we can talk about mentoring being important and giving lots of statistics, but we hone in and talk about Giselle and her experience working with her mentee and the relationship that they've been able to establish over several months and the impact that that relationship has had in setting up her mentee for success in the workforce. It makes it a much more powerful story. And with greater inspiration, we hopefully can encourage more people, more employees, more volunteers in our communities to step up, in addition to helping our young people also see the impact, the power of relationships. And so thinking about it in the context of how are we not just talking about our programs from a tactical point of view, but how are we also amplifying the stories that are coming out of those programs? Those stories, coupled with those solid success measures, really help align to the last couple trends that we've seen, which is around expansion. So really thinking about not just scale in terms of the number of people engaged or the number of people being served, but also the geographic expansion. So being able to take a small scale market or mentoring initiative in one community and really expand that impact to multiple communities across the country. And again, working in partnership with companies like LinkedIn enables you to do that. They're equipping mentoring programs with the tools and the human capacity in many locations to really deliver on these programs. And if, as Barry mentioned, if they don't have a presence, they also help do a train the trainer model. So they help prepare individuals in organizations to also deliver on the LinkedIn 101 or some of these other tools and resources that have been highlighted. The last thing I would just share is around advocacy, and that's really thinking about a lot of companies that you're seeing in the news today are advocating for a variety of social issues. One that comes to mind for me is the CEO of Salesforce. And so really thinking about the way that Mark has positioned himself as an advocate for education and workforce development, and really positioning his company, the company brand, the company tools and resources, and the company's employees rallying around that particular social cause. So thinking about how can you help companies to develop these types of platforms in a very substantial way. So really pointing to not just a PR campaign, but to the marketing and the substance behind the program, showing how employees are engaged, showing the results of their engagement by further amplifying the stories of impact. Barry, one question go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, I have 2 points that you made me think of with all of those insights, Dan. One is just around the storytelling and marketing. I think that's such a great call out. And it made me think about the fact that as a for-profit company, we always want to be talking about the great work our employees are doing, but we don't want to write a profile of every Giselle. And personally, as someone who manages LinkedIn for Good's online presence, I don't want it to seem like we're constantly tooting our own horn by going on and on about how amazing what the huge impact our employees are making in the community. But if we're working with a nonprofit that operates a blog and they want to write a post about an event they had with LinkedIn and how their youth benefited, then that adds incredible value for us. And it's something we might want to reshare because it speaks to our partnership. And again, that triple bottom line piece. So if you have the resources to create content and write about your corporate partners and the work you're doing, that's definitely something to call out that would add value for your partners as well. And Dan, the other thing that's really a question I was curious to get your thoughts on is that one trend I've seen is nonprofits who will come to the table and say, we'd get a lot of value out of your team hosting a LinkedIn 101 event or a speed networking session, but to do those events with your employees, we're going to charge you $10,000 each. And I guess I have mixed feelings about this. I think on one hand, it absolutely makes sense that a nonprofit would want to attach a price tag to this experience, knowing that you're adding value to the corporate partner and you also need to expand your own operational budget. On the other hand, I feel like when I get proposals like that from nonprofits, it makes it seem like the events in and of themselves don't add that much value. And so I am curious whether you have thoughts on that, Dan, and perhaps there are other people on the call too. If you want to add anything to the chat box on whether that's the way you would approach your corporate partnerships or if you have before.
Such a great question, Barry. I was actually doing a call last week with a group of mentoring programs, and we were talking a lot about fee-for-service programming and partnership building with companies. And so definitely would encourage others to weigh in the chat box if you've got particular a point of view about this. I would love to see your perspective. What I typically share with groups is that at the end of the day, we have to acknowledge that in any effective partnership, both sides of the partnership should be bringing value to the other. And so what we have to acknowledge is that there are certain costs associated with being able to deliver on programs, and those are certain costs associated to the value that we bring to these relationships. And so what I encourage people to do is to understand really at the end of the day, what are the hard costs associated with being able to implement a program? So just to play out the hypothetical, if I were thinking about offering, a LinkedIn 101 workshop series, I would really take a step back and think about, okay, what is the staff capacity that I need to be able to deliver on that programmatic commitment? And then what are some of the additional value adds that I can bring to LinkedIn? And in terms of what you were saying, leveraging our blog, leveraging our communications channels to amplify this experience, to tell the good news from a third-party point of view about what LinkedIn is doing and how they're committing to helping people succeed on their path to employment or success in life, and then figure out what the sort of market value is of that contribution. then you sort of have to switch and really practice empathy and thinking about like what's the other side of the equation bringing to the programmatic work too. So what is LinkedIn's value? They've developed these tools and resources, which makes it turnkey for organizations. They may be providing staff that are coming out to help facilitate or volunteer for the event. And so thinking about what are the costs that they're putting on the table, whether it's financial or in kind. And then that's where you have the balance. You negotiate, okay, here's what our hard costs are, here's what we believe our market value is, and then you have a conversation about what type of investment can be made to implement the program. I would strongly discourage groups from just setting flat fees and saying, regardless of the context of the program or the project, here's what it costs us to do, X, Y, or Z. Really be mindful of what each partner is bringing and what your true hard costs are, as well as an assessment of the market value. That would be my 2 cents.
That's great. Definitely more than 2 cents.
Right.
That was such a
good call.
Very detailed, helpful answer, hopefully from the nonprofit perspective, but also from the corporate perspective, because I do think that if an ask or a price tag were positioned not as a flat fee, but as something justified by the programmatic investment required by a nonprofit or the value add to employee experience, marketing and communications exposure, et cetera, I would have a different relationship to that number. So I really love that advice.
Yeah, and the last thing I would just say is I think it's super important for people to educate each other. So context really matters in partnerships. And so for a nonprofit organization to share with a company, like I remember when I was managing corporate relations for Capital One, I would always ask the organizations that I was working with, how much time will it take for you to go out and recruit the participants for a program like this? And they would say, like, here are the 2 or 3 communications or recruitment tactics that we've used that have been effective, and here's how much staff time it takes to make that happen. I would then factor that into whatever financial contribution we would make to support the program. So I think just raising each other's awareness around what it takes. I think the same is true of as somebody who used to recruit employees to serve as volunteers for projects as well. I mean, there's a real cost to trying to recruit the fellow employees from the company to come out and participate in an event as well. So just being mindful of both sides of the equation is super key. I'm just going to sort of quickly, again, if you've got perspectives or feedback, please put it in the chat box. We'd love to get your point of view. I just want to highlight a couple quick things. I'm going to run through the next couple of slides pretty quickly and ask Barry some follow-up questions as well. So the next slide is just outside of these trends. Again, a lot of times people will ask, well, how do I just get access? And I've heard this from companies and from nonprofit organizations. So some companies, they want to reach out and work with other corporations on projects like this. And obviously nonprofits are interested in engaging with companies too. And one of the things I always say is like really do an intentional mapping of who it is that you ultimately feel would be a great partner and why. And then begin to rank them so that you've got a clear set of prioritized partnerships that you're going after, instead of sort of the spaghetti on the wall approach, which is like, hey, I'm just going to constantly talk about partnership and hope that every conversation I have lands in some sort of a programmatic commitment. And so being super intentional in building these relationships can be a much more strategic way of building longer term relationships that maybe start with a short-term engagement and then evolve to a longer term, more sustainable relationship. And on the screen, what you see are a variety of different lenses that you can take to think about who are all those potential partners. So everything from industry alignment. So if you're a school-based mentoring program, or you are a company and you are running a school-based mentoring program or working in close partnership with schools, think about who are all the vendors that school district or educational institution, if it's a higher ed program, are working with, and which vendors really have an invested interest in the success of their client relationship with that school district or with that higher education institution, and are there ways in which you can align your relationship where you each bring value to the program. If you skip down a few, employee engagement, we've talked a lot about. The one thing, Barry, I know that you wanted to hit on was just around making sure we engage and think about diversity networks. Do you want to talk a little bit about LinkedIn and their diversity network engagement?
Yeah, sure. So a big priority for LinkedIn is diversity, inclusion, and belonging in the workplace. And as part of that, we have employee resource groups that represent specific communities. And there's a long list. Some of the largest are Hispanics of LinkedIn Alliance, Black Inclusion Group at LinkedIn, Women at LinkedIn, Out at In. We have Enable In, which is employees representing folks on the disability spectrum. So this has been a really fantastic opportunity for Mentor and other nonprofits to plug in, because we're finding that these organizations and groups are not only interested in doing work internally, but also in looking outside of LinkedIn and working in the community. So Enable In doesn't just want to talk about the experience of being differently abled as an employee, or talk about resources for children who are on the autism spectrum if you're a parent at LinkedIn. They also want to be working with job placement services for adults on the autism spectrum in the community. And often they'll come to the social impact team, LinkedIn for Good, and say, hey, could you refer us to these opportunities, or could we use these materials, because they want to host events on their own. And so I would say that as much as you're reaching out to, let's say, the social impact or the philanthropy team at a company, you should also consider the diversity, inclusion, and belonging groups that are within those organizations and might align. So another example is that Dan is working with our Black Inclusion Group to plan a mentoring program. And it's not only an internal mentoring program where more senior employees will mentor younger employees, but they're also potentially working with an external nonprofit organization that serves youth of color, so that the members of that group can become mentors for young people in the community who can benefit from their mentorship. So I'm seeing a lot of nonprofit partnerships spark in that space, and I think it's something to keep an eye on if you're working with companies, other companies that have groups like this.
Absolutely. And then there's a couple other ways that we would just toss out for people to consider in terms of making connections. So obviously thinking about who are some of the decision makers or some of the influencers within local organizations or corporations that you can reach out and build connections to. It doesn't always have to be the most senior leaders or the people that, the market leads for the community. It can be emerging leaders that are highlighted in the local press or in the local media. It can be employees who have a powerful connection to your mission or to a particular cause. It can also be about researching existing sponsorships or grant investments that companies are making within the community, and really thinking about how are they not just writing checks, but how are they engaging in diverse ways with those community-based organizations, much of which Barry had talked about before. It's not just about writing a check to a local organization, but it's about fully leveraging all that LinkedIn has to offer, from its tools and resources with LinkedIn coaches to employee engagement, to a variety of other things that I'm going to make sure we have time for Barry to cover with everybody. And then the last thing I would just highlight here in terms of some ways that you can make connections would be this last point about leveraging networking opportunities and tools. Obviously leveraging LinkedIn, but also I really encourage people to go where your target partners are. A lot of times I hear people say like they don't have access to who they want to work with. But oftentimes when I ask them where they're spending most of their time, they're spending most of their time in the existing circles that they already have. And so I always challenge organizations, both companies and nonprofit organizations, to go into new circles and really both expand your knowledge of what's happening in those circles and thinking about how to make connections outside of the sort of normal group that you see from event to event or from meeting to meeting within your community. Last couple of things I would just say is, always establishing social media connections, reaching out on LinkedIn. I will tell you again firsthand, we've heard from a lot of folks that come out to these mentoring events that leveraging those connections and building those relationships following the event not only helps connect them to that individual, but it often helps them to connect to other people in that potential mentors network. And so it's sort of exponential. There's a ripple effect that can start to unfold with each new interaction, each new outreach that someone does. And then just encourage people to build multiple relationships. I think one of the things that I've been so impressed with our partnership with Barry and her colleague Cami is that there are all these different groups and connections within LinkedIn. So Barry and Cami connected us with the diversity networks at LinkedIn, which unfolded into a whole new partnership aspect, which really, again, helped to further engage employees at the company all across the U.S. in mentoring activities, both internally and externally. So cultivating several champions within an organization or within a company can often lead to more sustainable, longer-term relationships that really do go deeper and are not as tactically focused as they are on the relationship, which is so key. Barry, anything you want to add before we jump to the next section?
No, I don't think so. I think those are all great points, Dan.
Okay. Sorry, last slide is just, and I want to reiterate what Barry mentioned earlier, like low effort to high effort. I use this slide in a lot of trainings around building partnerships and thinking about a continuum of engagement. So again, regardless of whether you're a company or a nonprofit organization mentoring program, really think about your engagement. So when Barry talks about a speed networking event and inviting LinkedIn employees to come out for that one-time event, that's an opportunity to get introduced to the idea of mentoring. And then maybe they come out and they help organize the next speed networking event for one of the community partners like Year Up that comes out to the Bay Area office for LinkedIn. And then from that point, maybe they make a really solid connection with one of the Year Up students that's in the program, and they agree to be a longer term mentor for that individual. So thinking about it as sort of stepping stones and like naturally making the connection for folks that come out to events on what's the next step up and how do we keep cultivating and deepening those relationships and that level of engagement over time.
Yeah, I think that's such a great slide because you just reminded me, Dan, we recently heard from an organization that wanted us to hire youth interns, and we just didn't have the capacity to support that for this coming summer. And the woman at the nonprofit seemed really upset when we spoke to her and really disappointed. And we felt terribly that we weren't able to support the project and sort of ended on this negative note, and that's it. And we're not planning to work with her organization in another capacity. But if perhaps, and I understand if she doesn't have the bandwidth right now, but would love in the future to maybe start smaller with one of those resume review or mock interview events to get some employees hooked. Then to Dan's point, maybe there are some employees who would open up their schedules for job shadowing. And then maybe in 2019, we can have a more robust youth internship program. Basically, keeping in mind that sometimes you have to bite off something smaller so that an organization and its employees can get really invested and in the long term have a larger partnership or a larger program.
Absolutely. So Barry, I know that outside of the LinkedIn coaches, I recently have come across additional resources and ways that LinkedIn is really supporting community. And so I'd love it in the last couple minutes if you could run us through some of these great resources that folks on the phone can tap into.
Yes, happily. So I'll start with some resources that I think you should keep an eye on for insights and inspiration, either for your work or for the personal and professional development of your role within your roles or of the young people you're serving. One is the Economic Graph team. And our Economic Graph team is a team that is focused on digitally mapping the global economy based on all of the data on LinkedIn. So we have 545 million members, we have millions of jobs, a ton of companies, schools, a lot of knowledge posted on LinkedIn. And so this is a team primarily of data scientists that work with policymakers and some nonprofits to share this data and help them make decisions about the future of work. And so there are some labor market insights that could be interesting available at economicgraph.linkedin.com. And every month they'll produce labor market insight reports that talk about how talent is coming to or leaving a specific city, what skills gaps are in that city, and what jobs based on our data seem to be in high demand. So that's something interesting for anyone who would want some data to supplement their work or is curious about that world. We also have a LinkedIn speaker series that's just an amazing perk that we provide our employees. And we've invited a ton of incredible people to speak at these events, which happen sometimes more than monthly. Some of my favorites were President Obama and Cory Booker a long time ago. But all the videos are available on our podcast as well as on a blog and on YouTube. So if there are particular people that you're inspired by, feel free to check out whether they're on speakers.linkedin.com and share them with your program participants if it seems relevant. And on the next slide, I wanted to call out LinkedIn Learning. So LinkedIn Learning is our e-learning offering that we built after acquiring the company lynda.com a few years ago. So LinkedIn Learning has a ton of online courses. It's all the lynda.com content that we've basically ported onto the LinkedIn Learning platform and you log into with your LinkedIn account. So it's all in sync now. And the young people that have used LinkedIn Learning are using everything from project management and advanced Microsoft Excel courses to preparing for an interview courses or leadership skills and powerful body language. So there's really a broad range of courses. I even talked to a Europe alum who was using it to become an audio engineer because there are a ton of audio engineering courses on, and that's what he wants to pivot to ultimately. LinkedIn Learning is a paid product. So to get access to many of the courses, you need to have at minimum a job seeker premium subscription on LinkedIn, and then you're able to access all of the courses. However, there are some courses that are unlocked. One is Learning LinkedIn. Another one is called Learning LinkedIn for Students that show people how to make the best use of LinkedIn. And another secret is that many public libraries offer free lynda.com licenses for their residents. So if you do not want to purchase a LinkedIn premium subscription or students don't have the ability to, you can contact your local library branch and ask whether they have a Lynda offering. And if that's the case, then anyone with a library card in that network can access LinkedIn Learning for free. Next slide. So another thing my team is focused on doing is making sure that folks from underrepresented communities can use the LinkedIn platform to find mentors. And we do have a feature called Career Advice, which is a way for you as a professional or your mentees to get in touch with other professionals for quick career chats. So the way someone accesses this is indicated in this flow. It's basically an entry point on the profile page. And you can say what you want to get advice on, if you care about specific industries or specific functions. And then our algorithm will give you recommendations of people you may want advice from. And then you can send that person a message and say, hey, I'm thinking about your college. Can you tell me more about it? Or I'd love to get your advice on this industry. So again, it's more of a quick chat mechanism, but definitely a lightweight way to get some career advice or mentorship through the LinkedIn platform. And then last, I'd like to mention that we have a resource for nonprofits to find the right people, specifically mentors and volunteers. We partner with a few different organizations, including Mentor and Volunteer Match, to post 70,000 volunteer opportunities on LinkedIn. And if you're familiar with the LinkedIn interface, you recognize this as a list of jobs. So that's basically what they look like. But it's a free way to get your mentor, skill-based volunteering, or board member opportunities on LinkedIn. And if you go to our website, linkedinforgood.linkedin.com, you can see a list of all the partner sites. I think Mentor and Volunteer Match are probably the most relevant. You can post for free, get your opportunity up there, and then within 24 hours, it will be added to LinkedIn.
That's awesome. Thanks, Barry. We have time. We have 1 minute left. And so I went through the questions. I think we covered most of the comments and questions that people had submitted, but there's one key question that I'd love to get your feedback on, and that is, does LinkedIn offer Train the Trainer for coaches via a webinar if you don't have LinkedIn staff in their market?
Yes. So we would schedule it especially for your organization because we don't have anything recorded at this time, but we're definitely open to doing that. And so if you follow the link to request a session, we'd love to set up time to schedule that webinar.
Okay, awesome. And again, just as a reminder to everybody that's tuned in today, I will make sure that I send out the slides from today's session as well as the recording, which will include the links that Barry mentioned. And that'll include a few additional resources that might be helpful to support you with the speed networking and some of the other activities that Barry mentioned that you might want to integrate into your program. So just in closing, I just want to say there are lots of additional resources that are available from Mentor outside of this Impact webinar series that we host with our corporate and philanthropic partners, many of which are on the screen. And we just strongly encourage that you check out these tools, these resources, these ways of connecting with each other across the country. And I want to just say a huge, huge thank you to Barry for joining me today for the session and for all of the great work that LinkedIn is doing. Again, just such a great sort of toolbox of resources and opportunities to support young people as well as mentors across the country. So a huge thank you to you and your team at LinkedIn.
Thanks for having me, Dan, and thanks to all of you for listening.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.